Here's a way to do a dry point self-portrait. First, I bevel the edges of the copper plate with a power grinder and I finish with a file. Then I polish the plate with steel wool and put a mirror finish on it with a metal polish or even a buffing wheel on a power drill. Then I take my digital snapshot, put that on a computer for guideline. I needle in the image with my dry point needle and I make little changes with burnisher. Sometimes I use an electric engraver. Now my plate is ready to ink with a chip of mat board and I roll the ink out with a brayer. Then I wipe the plate with a page from a telephone book and hand wipe it for a final polish. My paper soaked for an hour. I blot off the surface water, tighten the pressure on my press, put the plate on the bed, the paper on the plate, and run it through, and there's my finished dry point. Here's how I make a fine line etching using a liquid hard ground. First I bevel the edge of the copper plate, and then I back it with plastic or a spray paint. I scrub the surface with a cleanser and check it in water to see if water sheets across the surface. Then I blow it dry with a dryer or paper towels and apply the liquid ground with a soft brush. When it's dry, I check it for pinholes. I needle in the design using a sharp etching needle. I immerse it in ferric chloride for 5 or 10 minutes and check it with a magnifier. I remove the ground with a solvent and then I apply the ink with a piece of mat board. Then I wipe with a page from a telephone book and I finish with a hand wipe, and I'm ready to run it through the press and check my proof. Here's how you can do a soft ground etching. You start with a prepared plate with a bevel and a polished surface. I'm using Charbonnel soft black ground in ball form. The ball melts on the plate when you heat it. You roll it out with a soft brayer. When it's cool, you cover it with paper and tape it down and draw. You press hard. You can check your progress. Here's how it looks from the front. Here's the back. It's ready to etch. I stick on plastic buttons because it's going to be etched upside down in ferric chloride for 20 minutes. You can check the depth of the etch with a magnifier. When it's done, dissolve the ground, strip off the backing, apply etching ink, wipe with tarlatan, paper, and finish with a hand wipe. You print on damp paper, and then you pull your proof. Here's how I do a relief print from a woodcut on my Mini Halfwood Press. I started with a design I printed out on my laser printer. Then I transferred the laser print to a block using lacquer thinner and run it through my Mini Halfwood Press. And I start to cut. I use a knife and I cut away from the image at an angle. Then I go back and cut a V shape all around the line areas, and finally I clear out all the open areas with a gouge. I dampen my paper with a spray bottle and put it in a plastic bag. I roll out my ink and I start inking my block. I get the press ready by putting down the chase and a blanket. Then I put my damp paper down into the chase and put my wood block on it face down and roll it through the press. And I lift the block, and there's my finished print. Here's a way to put a laser image on a metal plate and etch it in for making printing plates. Here I'm using it to etch a Mini Halfwood Press medallion. Print on a photo paper and put the design face down on a clean copper or brass plate, and then press it with a hot iron. The image will stick. Soak it in hot water. When it's well saturated, the paper will rub off. Rub it until the glossy substance is removed and only the black remains. Cover the back to protect it. A self-adhesive plastic or tape works. Put it in a ferric chloride mordant on its edge or face down. I needed to etch it for 10 or 20 minutes. I put a rough surface in and I use aquatint and I etch it a second time. Finally, I clean it off with a strong solvent with lots of ventilation because this is hazardous to your health. After it's trimmed and polished, I could print it, but this one goes on my Mini Halfwood Press.
Welcome to the Halfwood Press studio. Today we're testing Mini Halfwood Press number 47. It's way to Alaska this week, and with every Halfwood Press I make, I do a test. This artist sent me a JPEG image on the internet and in an email, and I transferred it to 22 gauge copper with the laser print transfer technique on silicone-coated paper ink. Now, this blue etching ink I chose because the original art was blue. It was titled Blue Moose, by the way. And this etching ink is quite stiff, very stiff. And so I'm going to modify it with a little Miracle Gel Reducer. This is a small can that I took from a larger can that I bought from Daniel Smith Ink Company in Seattle. It's a kind of I don't know what it is. It's a kind of wax or oil mixture or something like that. And you just take a little bit of that and work it into the ink. This takes quite a while, so we'll pause the video until I'm finished. What a difference it made. I added probably 3 or 4 times more of that little bit that you saw at the beginning. There are other ink modifiers to make your ink softer, easier to manage. One is made by Graphic Chemical and Ink Company, and it's called Easy Wipe. Another way to reduce inks and change the ink is with burnt plate oil. There's still another way, and that's with Flash Oil 470. Another Daniel Smith product. Any of these things added to your ink will change the way it works. Finally, there's temperature. This is a little hot plate that is warming up, and when I wipe my plates, I often warm the plate. Also, when I print the plate, I warm it first. Now I'm ready to ink up the plate. Take a little bit. Be careful not to scratch the plate with this steel spatula. Another way to spread the ink out, which is a little safer, is to use a chip of 4-ply mat board onto the hot plate. The ink will immediately get a lot softer, but you don't overheat the plate. It shouldn't be so hot that you can't pick it up. What I'm using underneath is called a sticky board. It's that kind of plastic pad that you can buy in kitchen supply stores to keep things from sliding around. And I stapled it to a piece of plywood, so it makes a handy little device for holding your plate while you're inking and wiping. Now it's time to start wiping the plate. I can wipe with tarlatan, which is a kind of a starched cheesecloth. I have a collection of various colors here, from dark to light. You wipe lightly and quickly. You see the image coming up right away. But you don't want to overdo the tarlatan wiping. Otherwise, you'll wipe out the image. Lately, I've switched over most of the time to paper wiping, which is telephone pages. Not too hot to handle. Onto the sticky pad. Now, while I'm wiping the plate, I would tell you that under the press, visible underneath the press that I'm going to test, is a GAMP book. It looks like a plastic bag, and it has about 4 or 5 sheets of paper that I soaked for a few minutes, then blotted off and put into the damp bag, and they've been sitting there under the press, under weight, for overnight. That makes the paper, which is a printmaking paper, nice and soft, and that will make the paper able to be embossed down into the plate and around the foot mark. That does it for the paper wipe. Now we go to the hand wipe. The hand wipe, it's helped along with a little bit of talcum powder. The hand wipe is a light, quick pass of the heel of the hand across the plate. If you like a less contrasty image, you might not do the hand wipe. You might also add more oil to your ink. Now some cleaning on the edges. Now we're ready for the first trial proof. I'm going to put this material under the Mini Halfwood Press because it only weighs 12 pounds, and until you become accustomed to it, it might tend to walk around. Now here's how you load the press. First, I tighten the top roller all the way down to the bed, and then I count the turns: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 half turns, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 half turns, which is about 5 turns total. And then it's pretty easy to start the roller under. Then I tighten it back down. 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 2 kinds of paper in here. I believe this one is Arches Cover. Now we're ready to test number 47. Now we pull the proof. There it is. Blue Moose, after an artwork by the artist who purchased this press, who bought this press, and for whom I made this press and this test print. Owners always get the print, the plate, and all the little pieces and parts that went into making it. So this completes the test. Thank you for watching.
To make a Silitransfer etching, you print on that throwaway backing from label stock. I worked from an image from Photoshop and printed it on a laser printer. And then I used a laminator to transfer the image to a copper plate. And I peeled off that backing paper and it left the toner on the copper. Then I etched it in ferric chloride. After I put on an aquatint, I put the aquatint on to reinforce the toner. It takes about 7 seconds to lay the aquatint powder, and then I fuse it on with a hot plate. Then I thought this one needed a little reinforcement with some spray paint and some touching up with rosin stop out before it went into the ferric chloride. Took it out of the ferric chloride, washed it off, and sometimes I like to give it a bath in vinegar with a little salt. It sort of brightens up the image after it's been in that bath. Then I rinse it off again. Blow it dry and check to see how the etching went. Looked beautiful. So I cleaned it off with alcohol. It takes away the rosin. And then lacquer thinner. I had a fan going in the background. It dissolves the black toner, and there's my plate.